So we have looked at a couple different critters so far. We've looked at a frog and we've looked at a corn snake. Now we have a ball python. This seems like a more significant snake.
Yeah, so we're going to take a step up as far as the size of the animal on this one. Going to be a little bit heavier bodied of an animal, and have just a few more things. It takes a little bit more knowing of what we're doing with them to keep an eye on a couple other things with these guys.
Is he angry? He looks
No,
pissed.
no, they're just very aware. So these guys, they can sense a lot with both their tongue as well as they actually, being a python, have heat pits on the end of their nose, so they can kind of sense everything going on around them.
Wow. So this is a young one. There's a lot of growing to do yet. How big does a ball python get?
So ball pythons are going to get about 5 feet, so just a little bit longer than the corn snakes, but they're going to be heavier bodied than the corn snakes.
Bigger
So they're going to be
around.
about twice as wide around compared to the corn snakes. So they're going to eat a little bit heavier sized prey when they get bigger, but they also have a little bit more size to be able to hold on to. And so that's what, for me, it can be a nice thing for some of the kids out there with smaller hands. It's actually easier to hold on to the bigger snake. You know, the little snakes become a little bit stringy of a noodle for them to hold on to.
Oh yeah, it's like slipping
you know,
away.
and so it's slipping around. Whereas these guys, they're easier to hold on to, but also they get that name ball python because their general action is to sit in a ball like this. You know, whereas the corn snake's going to be always curling around and moving around our hands, the ball python likes to sit into a ball like this. So they're a little bit more sedated that way.
With a bigger snake comes bigger food.
Going to come bigger food, whereas the corn snake's going to top out on a small rat when it's older. These guys are going to eat medium to even larger rats, where the corn snake's going to start off on a pinky mouse. These are going to start off usually on a small mouse, you know, kind of a thing, or even a pinky rat, you know, kind of a thing. So the prey is going to be a little bit bigger to go for these guys.
Got it. So you'll be having mice and rats that you're buying regularly for these
You're going to
guys.
want to stay regular on the mice and rats. And again, you're going to use the live ones, but then work them over to frozen. One of the challenges with ball pythons, they can be a little bit harder to work over to the frozen, so it might just take a little bit of patience with it, working them over to it. Don't get frustrated too quickly on it, but they can definitely be changed over and worked on that.
Got it. Okay.
When we're selecting prey items with any of the snakes, what we want to do is we always want to feed them, and after they eat, it should leave a little bit of a bulge in their stomach. We should know that the animal ate. If we're feeding it and after they've eaten, you can't notice that they've eaten, it's time to move to the next size prey.
I see.
Talk to one of the counselors, we can find the next size option for them.
Got it. And they have like the ability to swallow something that's pretty darn big, like bigger than what it would seem, yeah?
Exactly, yeah. What we do is we look for something that's about the size of the widest part of their body.
Oh, wow.
So that way, when they eat it, they can take in quite a bit of food that way, but they can actually stretch their jaws in such a way that allows them to be able to take in those large prey items.
Wow. That's cool. That's different.
Yeah, for an animal that has that skinny of a neck, but that large of a body, we're looking for the fat part of the body, not the skinny part of the neck.
Very interesting. Okay, so, and this is just kind of like a regular looking ball python. They come in a bunch of different colors.
So these guys are going to come in all different kinds of colors, you know, from things that have a couple of genes, as we like to call them in the ball python world, to 5 gene, you know, morphs.
Okay.
So they call them the different morphs, and there's plenty of different variety that goes into them. You know, it's an ever-changing kind of a thing. So if you don't see the color you want, it's probably out there.
Got it. And is there any care requirements difference between a really fancy one versus a basic one?
Not at all.
Got it.
The only other type that would be any sort of difference is there is now a scaleless type of ball python. So you got to be careful with them, just making sure the humidity stays good because they don't have those scales that help them, you know, kind of a thing.
Wow.
But otherwise, all of the other morphs are the exact same care.
That's interesting. Cool. Okay, so with our corn snake, we were able to start with a 20 long. Is that the same with ball python?
Yeah, same thing. We can start off with this. We're going to, again, though, probably within a year, going to have to move up to a larger size cage. Going to be looking for something, again, up to that 4-foot range for them.
Got it. All right. So then, same idea with the snakes where we have our temperature equipment. We're going to have a light from above and a heat mat from below.
Correct. We want to make sure that we've be able to create that temperature gradient inside of there. Using the heat mat and the light works well for them. The big major change that's going to happen with these compared to the corn snakes is corn snake came from the United States. These guys come from Africa.
Oh.
Africa is going to be more humid where they come from, so we're going to want to look to increase that humidity inside of the cage. People will go with a bigger water dish. That's definitely a way to do it. Some people like to stay with the snake bedding because it's easy to clean, but it's not going to hold humidity as well for us. So one of our nice options that we've got is we've also got our coconut chips. The coconut chips are going to be chunks of coconut that will expand when we stick it into water, holds humidity well, but also works as a texture to allow them for helping with shedding.
So they rub on it.
So they can rub up against it, so when they want to shed that skin, it's easier for them to shed the skin. So works great for being able to keep that humidity in there and better replicating that African kind of texture and humidity for them.
Got it. Cool. When we feed them, we don't feed them in the main enclosure?
Yeah, same idea. We're going to want to bring them out, let them feed in something, you know, where they're feeling a little bit comfortable that way. So take them out, put them into a separate enclosure with their prey item. That way they're not able to just go and hide in the corner and not be able to see their prey item. They'll eat it for you, but we can also watch and see how responsive they are to eating, and gives a chance to be able to just also look over the snake and make sure that, you know, they're in a good, healthy spot for it.
And how often are we feeding our ball python?
Generally speaking, with the ball pythons, you're going to want to feed them about every 7 days. Keep them on a nice, simple routine. Keeps the owners on a good routine that way too, and makes it a good place for them to go.
Sweet. Okay, and then what else do we have to do to round out our habitat? Is it just the same as with the other snakes?
Same idea with the other snakes. We want to make sure that they've got a good place to be able to hide, but we want to be able to provide other things that they can climb around on, move around on. Being a heavier bodied snake, you're usually not going to find them, you know, too far up in the trees, but they'll still utilize any of those branches that you give them, but just make sure the branch can support their weight. They're going to use it, they're going to climb up in there, do all of those things. I still think it's a great idea to give them some plants and such. That's going to create a background to the back of the cage as well, so that way they're not worried about things coming in and attacking them from that way. So makes them feel secure.
And you know, I've seen a lot of ornaments like skulls and stuff like that. Is that okay to put in with your?
Those are perfectly fine to put in there. What I want is I want the keeper to be really happy with the way that it all looks. They're going to engage themselves with the way that it all looks. So if you want to keep a skull as your hide spot, and that means you're going to take better care of your animal, go for it.
Is there anything you shouldn't be putting into a habitat like this?
The biggest things you want to stay away from are going to be anything that are going to be too abrasive. So things that are going to have really sharp edges. You know, there's some glass rock you can use in the aquarium world and things like that. Don't use that inside of here. That's going to be too sharp for them. That'd be the biggest thing to stay away from.
Okay, cool. And what is the hot side versus the cold side? Is it similar to the other snakes?
Great question. So again, because they're from Africa, they're going to go a little bit warmer on it. So these guys are going to go up into the low 90s. We can go about 92 to 94 on the warm side. Cool side, we're going to be down about 75 degrees. Just naturally, because we're putting more heat into the other end of the cage, that's going to warm up the other side of the cage to about 75 for us. So again, all the heat on one end, keep it nice and cool, easy on the other end.
And so if I have my thermometer in here and I've got my light and I've got my mat and it's not hitting the 90 range, what do I do?
So we're going to look for either a different style of light bulb, or we're going to go to a higher wattage on it. My recommendation for most snakes is that we're going to go with the daylight blue style of bulb. They work really well to raise the ambient temperature, but if we need to get it hotter, we have our basking style of bulb, and that'll create more heat in a focus spot for us.
Got it. What do we use the red bulbs for?
Red bulbs are for nighttime, so that way if we want to be able to see, these guys are a little bit more nocturnal, so they're going to be a little bit more active at night. So it's going to allow us to be able to see that animal moving inside of there. But also, if we're keeping them in a room that's a little bit colder, a room that's got, you know, in a basement, things like that, that red bulb is going to give us just a little bit of extra heat that way to keep that ambient temperature up.
So the range where it's 90 something on the hot side and 75 on the cool side, is that 24/7, or can it dip at night, or how does it go?
We can let it dip at night. We want to have those gradual nighttime temperature drops just like they would have out in the wild. So we're going to let that drop down. Normally speaking, whole cage can get right down to about 70 degrees at night.
Okay, so we could potentially just turn the light off at night?
Let that light turn off. The heat pad's going to stay on 24 hours a day. It's going to warm up the substrate and everything else down there. So it's going to keep some sort of warmth. In the wild, they live in termite mounds. Inside of that termite mound, it's going to stay nice and warm.
Oh yeah.
You know, so that's going to retain that heat just like that heat pad would.
Got it. So we definitely need to know what our temperature gradient is. We don't want to be flying blind. So anytime we get a setup, we want to have at least the digital, or if we're not going to do the digital thermometer, would we have 2 different thermostats on, or thermometers on there?
That's a great way to go with it. That way, like we talked, the standard dial thermometers, once they're stuck onto the cage, they're stuck there. So having 2 of them so that way we can better measure where they're going is a great way to do it. And what I'd want to do with any of the snakes is I want to put this low in the cage, kind of right above the bedding. If we put it up high, the snake's never going up there. It's not a part of the environment where we're actually getting an idea of what temperatures he's exposed to. So put it down low, put it right where they're going to be at, and it's a great way to do it. Thermometers are the #1 tool you can have as a reptile keeper, so always a great idea to have them.
So when, I guess that's one thing that we hear a lot when people come in and they own one of these and suddenly their ball python may stop eating, the first question we always want to know is what's the temperature of the enclosure? Because temperature does have something to do with their appetite, yeah?
100%. Anytime there's any issue with any other reptiles, especially snakes not eating, first question that we have to address is, what's that temperature? How do we know where it's going? If the temperatures get too cold, it tells these animals that it's going to become winter. They're going to want to slow down. They don't do a true hibernation, but if the weather gets too cold that way, they're going to go into what we call a brumation, which is kind of a false hibernation.
Got it.
We want to prevent that, unless completely needed.
And does it matter where, like, if the snake sees our natural weather, like if they're in a room where they can see the daylight cycles, does that affect them in any way?
No, daylight cycles are perfectly fine for them. They should have those natural gradients, keep the lights on in the cage, for about 10 hours a day, that kind of a replication, but the natural cycle outside is great for them.
Okay. But not in a window. You wouldn't put them near a window.
I wouldn't put them near a window just because there's going to be too many drafts and things like that.
Got it. Okay, cool. So we've talked a lot about the care. We know about the temperature gradient. We know about the habitat, the substrate, the heating. Is there anything else we need to know about ball python?
Ball pythons, the biggest other thing that we didn't really touch on is how long they can live.
Okay.
Ball pythons, again, I think we talked about it in the first video. These guys can go quite a while. 45 years is getting up there in the high end of it. You generally speaking, though, want to realize you're committing to at least 25 years with these guys.
Wow.
So a decent little life commitment out of them.
Holy moly. Cool.
This guy's warmed up and ready to go.
Oh yeah, you've been holding him, so now he's more active, and that's just because he's absorbed the heat from you?
He's absorbed the heat from me, but he's also recognized that I'm no longer a predator and that I'm just a nice tree branch for him to climb along, so he'll keep moving.
That's cool. All right. So that's the information on a ball python. If you have any questions about ball python versus any of the other reptiles, please come into the store and ask for a pet counselor.